Hi, I'm Moshe, and I'm autistic.
I'm Leah, and I'm boring. Welcome to the Now You Know One Autistic podcast.
The opinions expressed in this podcast reflect one autistic and one Leah, and don't necessarily reflect the entire autistic community.
Let's get to it. Hi, Moshe.
Hi, Leah.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. So today, are you ready to talk a little bit more about communication?
Yes, we're going to talk a little bit more about communication. We're going to communicate about communication.
For the thousandth, I don't know, however many episodes this is.
It's a lot of episodes. I think I've lost count.
I think it's an ongoing issue in the podcast because it's an ongoing issue in our life.
Yes. And this is, I think this is our fourth time trying to record this episode.
I think it's our third attempt. This was a cursed episode. So hopefully today we'll be able to publish it.
We've updated our equipment. We have got everything consistent down. We've done everything we could.
If it doesn't work this time, I'm going to say it's just a poltergeist and we're going to skip this topic.
Right. Obviously, peaceful resolution does not end peacefully.
Do you think that might be a thing? That's terrible. That's a horrible thought. So anyway, you gave it away. The topic today is peaceful resolutions.
Good.
Okay. So thoughts?
Peaceful resolutions, when it comes to communication, is always important because when you have discussions or disagreements or, cross-social arguments, you need to focus on how you're going to resolve we'll call it disagreement, in a way that allows things to be copacetic.
Right. So disagreement. Define disagreement.
Well, it can really vary depending on the topic. It really comes down to, I feel this way, you feel this way. How are we going to resolve this?
Mm-hmm.
Or something happened and one of us feels a certain way and the other one feels a different way. How are we going to reconcile our feelings? Or again, if we end up in more of a heated discussion, we'll say,
mm-hmm.
How are we going to come up from, way up and bring things down?
Yeah, I feel like we've made it clear to the audience now that we do sort of a free flow situation where we come up with topics and we have basic things that we want to hit, but we just have discussions. And you know what? This is actually bringing up something that I want to cover in terms of the format of our podcast and in terms of our discussions.
Yes.
Now, I just want to make it clear, and I've seen other mixed neurofunctionality couples doing content as well, that when it seems like the neurotypical is being, condescending, mm-hmm. or taking over or doing an explaining for their partner, please trust that it's because that person loves and cares for and knows their partner better than you do. Because the reality is, it's usually a concept or an idea that I can see is stuck in Moshe's mind, and I'm just helping him get it out.
Right. Unfortunately, in some instances, both in the past and currently ongoing, there are other podcasts or content that's out there on YouTube or, various podcast streaming sites that involve mixed functionality couples. There's a really interesting YouTube series that we follow. There's a TikTok.
I was thinking more about the TikTok. There's another couple where it's flipped. It's the male who's neurotypical. And especially because he's a male, it can look a lot like mansplaining and it can look a lot like he's being condescending to her. But he's not, because I see it. I see her in the background sort of struggling to get the words and the idea out. And it's just because he knows her and he's trying to help her.
Yeah. So I want to bring this up. Mostly it's been broached. If you go on TikTok and you look up Studies Show, that's the account name. And I actually don't know their names. We have spoken a couple of times. I've reached out to them and I'm like, whoa, you're kind of like the mirror image of us because I'm the autistic one and you're the neurotypical one. And in their instance, he's the neurotypical one and she's the autistic one. And they're a wonderful couple. And I love their content, and it actually amuses me a great deal to see their back and forth. But it's a really interesting dynamic that they have. And it actually reminds me a lot in certain aspects of the way you and I interact. And actually, I have reached out to them once or twice to see if there's ever any interest in doing a collaboration, because I would love to talk to them either on their show or on our show.
I'm sure that there's something we can do in the future, but I think ultimately what I'm looking for here is to just put out there that if you're going to judge something, first of all, listen. Listen to the whole thing. Listen to the whole interaction. And then try to put yourself in those person's shoes. Try to look for evidence, right? Evidence of the contrary. Moshe often takes off and talks the whole time, and I don't interrupt him. He often corrects me on things. But people won't see that because they're more sensitive to the idea that you're being, taken advantage of or whatever.
We had a couple of pieces of feedback since we recorded our last episode. One of them was very positive and one of them was very negative. And the one that was very negative was, it appeared to be somewhat needlessly negative.
Yeah, so I just want to say we're not opposed to negative feedback. We've been saying that since the beginning.
Right.
But if it just comes from a really horrible place that's not even based in reality, we're going to delete you.
And it brought up the topic. And I can only imagine that it would be pretty consistent across any interactions between someone with a disability and someone without a disability, especially if the discussion or the content was in regards to that disability. Because when you have an autistic person speaking for themselves, or you have a neurodivergent person or a disabled person speaking for themselves, then they have a voice. But if you have the content that we're trying to put out, where we offer different perspectives from neurofunctionality, it's almost, I would say, impossible, especially if you're looking at it from a somewhat skewed way, to come across like, well, you're clearly taking advantage of him, or you're clearly talking over him, or you're clearly making fun of him. And I just want to speak for myself that the podcast that we're doing, the podcast that Leah and I are doing, and the content that we're trying to put out is very much a mutual effort. There's nothing that I'm talking about that I feel in any way makes me come across as, under condescension or whatever. Leah and I love each other very much, and we've worked a lot on our relationship and on our communication. And I feel that she has never, to me, come across as anything but loving and accepting.
But that's the point. It's a couples podcast, and you're going to get both persons' perspectives, first of all, not just the autistic and not just the neurotypical. But also our goal has been the whole time for you to get a glimpse into our real life. And this is our real interaction. If you are not with somebody who has autism, you don't understand the fact that they often need to be prompted or that they need to be reminded of things. And I get that that can come across as sounding a certain way. But that's really just our life. So if you're interested in hearing our reality, then that's great. And we welcome that and we appreciate it.
Yeah.
But if you're going to read into it things that aren't there and just have a really negative perspective, needlessly so, and not coming from a good place, then we don't need it.
Right. And the final point that I want to make on this, at least from my perspective, is that there's a lot of really great content out there, both visual and audio, when it comes to neurodiversity and autism. But a lot of it is probably produced to a certain extent. Certain bits are filtered out, certain clips are shortened, certain audio is cleaned up. If it's video, a lot of the video is edited with different tools, which is wonderful. And it leads to some very great content, and it seems very sleek and very, very well put together. You'll notice that sometimes I'm clearing my throat, and you'll notice that we sometimes stutter a lot of ums and ahs. Sometimes you'll hear police sirens or ambulances in the background. And sometimes one of our children will come in and slam the door or make some noise that will come across as, interruptions. And we do some audio cleanup after the fact just to make everything sound more crisp. But this is our life. This is our raw, to a certain extent, unedited life. And this is the interactions that Leah and I have. And it's just, we don't have a script. We don't have consistent things that we cover all the time, because basically a lot of these episodes are off the cuff. We have general topics that we want to discuss, but mostly it's just us talking.
Yep. So now that we've cleared that up, I would like to get back on track with the topic.
Of course.
I felt the need, peaceful resolution, it kind of brought it up for me.
Right.
I felt the need to just mention what's actually going on versus what people may think. Because if you just want raw pro-autism content, it's out there. But that's not this. I'm very pro-autism. I'm very pro-Moshe. I'm very team Moshe. But you're going to hear both perspectives, and that's how that goes.
Right. So I don't feel that Leah's ever been condescending with me. We did receive a really nice bit of feedback from somebody recently that expressed appreciation for the work that we are doing to try and raise awareness on mixed neurofunctionality couples, on adult autistics, which are still not necessarily well documented in a lot of ways, on late diagnosed autistics and our experience throughout my life, especially from a younger age, where I was called everything from weird to quirky to absent-minded to easily distracted to shy to a drama queen.
I love that you're shy.
So all the things that made no sense to me when I was younger are now quite obvious too. And if you're an adult and you suspect that you might have autism or some sort of neurodivergency, I would definitely recommend that you seek out a diagnosis, because when I attempted to seek out my diagnosis, I was discouraged from doing so because they said, you're an adult, what's the point? There absolutely is a point, because it answers a lot of questions that you may have spent your entire life wondering.
Right. And that was actually me. When you were discouraged, I said, no, they owe you this.
Exactly.
Okay, so back to the topic at hand. Let's talk about, sorry about that, we went off on a tangent. Let's talk about the autistic need to be right. Explain the autistic need to be right. I have right in quotations there.
So it's somewhat stereotypical, but also somewhat accurate, that many autistics think of life in terms of a pattern, or the common comparison is a lineup of cars. And if one of the cars is slightly askew, or one of the cars is not in the right place, or the red car is supposed to be in front of the blue car, but the blue car is in front of the red car, then it seems almost instinctual or unconscious to try and correct it. And oftentimes that is very helpful. For example, I've had jobs where I had to inspect or proofread application, and it's very good. It's a very useful skill for noticing inconsistencies in your environment, or noticing inconsistencies in a person, or noticing things that the average person might overlook. We're really, really good at noticing when our partner got a new haircut, but it can sometimes...
Okay, so you need to really, actually, let's delve into that. You're really, really good when noticing your partner got a new haircut. Why? Because people might be thinking, it's like, oh, wow, you look so beautiful, darling. It's often not. It's, wow, you changed something. That's not okay.
Right.
Why did you do that?
It can have a negative, and that goes into the need to see the world in terms of patterns. Sometimes that can be a really cool skill, like you're really good at math, or you're very good at like doing Rubik's Cubes and stuff, or jigsaw puzzles. But sometimes it can just be really annoying. Like in my case, or in the case of other people, where something is not quite right and you feel the need to correct it. Right. So you say that we have an appointment on Monday at 5. And I say, actually, we have an appointment Monday at 5:10.
Right.
And you say, why does it matter? And I say, because it's 10 minutes off.
I know better than to say that.
Theoretically, like hypothetically speaking, that's kind of where it goes.
I know better than to die on a hill that dumb, truthfully.
Now, there's a common phrase that is often said. There's currently an ambulance going by. Hopefully we'll filter it out in post-production. There's been a propensity of emergency vehicles on major thoroughfares in Jerusalem now, but also all over Israel. I really don't want to get into the political aspects of it, but if you've watched the news, you know that the northern part of Israel from mostly Tel Aviv north is basically on fire right now. And they're having a very hard time controlling it because of consistent shelling. But that doesn't affect us. We can definitely discuss it at a later time. And I don't want to get into it because talking about Israel is a very controversial topic. But back to why it's important to be right.
So I do want to say something, actually. So let's flip this concept on its head. Everybody is very concerned about me being controlling of you. If I want to change anything about my physical appearance, there are steps now. You see, being with Moshe, it's not that I can just go get a haircut and make that change and then have that be okay, because that's actually not fair to his ability to process visual input. So I have to prepare him. I have to say, okay, honey, I think I'm going to go get my hair cut. And then he'll say, why, how much, how short, are you going to dye it? Is it going to change color? And that also could come across as very controlling, but it's not. It's just me understanding his ability to process. And it's better even if he can come with me and watch them do the haircut.
It's very important.
And again, it's one of those things that can come across a way, but it's not that way at all. And that is consistent through any physical change that I would have to make.
The need to see things in identifiable patterns is more than just a discomfort. It's actually an emotional reaction that a lot of people who are not autistic or neurodivergent might not understand.
Yeah. It's to the point where I'm curly haired, and if I straightened my hair, it would be an issue.
It would make me very upset for reasons that most people wouldn't understand. But it really just comes down to, this is how you look, and you've changed your look, and now I don't know what to do with this information.
Yep.
So it comes across as a very emotional thing. And that's not to say that it's not allowed, because the thing that I want to consistently say, in addition to the whole thing about this being one autistic and it doesn't reflect the greater autistic community such as they are, but that the things that are associated with neurodiversity and autism are not barriers. They're obstacles, and obstacles can be overcome in the way that Leah said, where I want to get a haircut. I need to get a haircut. I'm going to change some aspect of my life. So I'm going to prepare you in advance so you know, and if possible, I'm going to allow you to be present so that you can see the change happen on an ongoing basis and the end result.
And that's not me being controlled. That's me understanding that I can do it one way and have a much easier result. Or I can, sort of be difficult about it, do it the way I want to, and then have a whole confrontation later when it can just be sort of worked up to. And that's me deciding to make him and in retrospect, the rest of us all more comfortable.
And to the outside observer, a lot of these things, because they don't end here, unfortunately, can come across as showing me to be very controlling. One of the things that Leah and I struggled with early on and continue to struggle with are the concept of transitions. I have a big issue with transitions, which is not uncommon for autistics. You definitely want to prepare them in advance because sudden changes are not always taken very well, but that continues to the extent of, if we're sitting together and she gets up, she now knows that she'll usually say, I'm just going to go to the bathroom, or I'm going to go to the kitchen and check on supper. Because I used to be like, where are you going? What are you doing? What's happening? Because it's a sudden change. She was sitting and now she's standing. What's going on? Is she going to do something? Mm-hmm. Is she what's happening? And
when Moshe was a younger man, much younger man with less self-control, he would actually just literally physically grab me and throw me back into the sofa.
Right. And so now she will tell me where she's going, and sometimes she will do something that comes across as To the outside observer is asking permission, but it's not actually asking permission. It's mostly just telling permission. Something like, I'm going to go check on the dinner. Is that okay? And the answer will always be yes.
But is that okay? Is it okay if I go? It's, are you okay?
Yes.
Do you need me to do something before I go do this?
Exactly.
It comes across very different than what it is. Again, we could probably do a whole episode about just this. And it kind of seems like this episode is turning into an episode about this.
The idea of peaceful resolution and the need to be right feeds into this, because it very much is about, you were supposed to be sitting and now you're standing. What's changed?
Yes, hence the literally grabbing me by the pants and shoving me back into the seat.
Your hair was supposed to look like this. Now it doesn't. What's wrong with this? And it works reversely too, because we do have neurodiverse children. And if I change some aspect of myself, or one of them changes some aspect of themselves.
Do you remember when I cut your hair overnight and I woke up the next morning?
It takes,
she was not cool.
It takes a day or two for them to be like, I'm not okay with this. I need to figure this out. And heaven forbid I would trim my beard or shave my beard or something to that.
Mm-hmm.
If they can see my lip, it's going to be like a whole week.
Oh, yeah, no, Raya can't handle it. If she can see your lip, that's the end of it. Like, she won't even look at you till it grows back.
So it's very much about the need to be right. And the need to be right can sound like you said a thing and you're wrong. But it's also the need to believe that what you're currently experiencing will be consistent forevermore.
Right.
And if it changes, there needs to be preparation for that. So that's off topic, but not necessarily off topic.
Right. So again, one of the things that I have written down here is that an autistic will fight the need to be right, even if they know they're not right or if it's unrealistic, because it protects their self-esteem.
Yes.
Because the way that an autistic experiences the world often will lead itself to, how do I put this? Non-reality.
Yeah.
And they know this, and they wonder often, am I right about this? Is this true? Is this really happening? So sort of fighting to be right and saying, no, I was right about this one, not you, is sort of a protection to their self-esteem.
So this is a bit of a different concept than what we were just discussing. This feeds into the concept a bunch of different things. You're talking about a different way of taking in information that you see, that you hear, that you experience. This feeds into a processing delay. This feeds into a consistent understanding where you exist in the world, right, and your sense of self, which is often changing because of the need to mask. And sometimes the masks get mixed up a little bit. So the way it looks is this. As an autistic, I have a processing delay. Someone will talk to me about something. They'll give me information, and I will hear the information, but sometimes I won't take in the information. So I will acknowledge it. We'll skip over the times when it's not acknowledged, because those are very overt and knowledge. Like, are you listening? You're clearly not. Let's try again. But you take in the information. You acknowledge the information. Moshe, tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., we have an appointment. Okay, sure, no problem. Information taken in, information acknowledged, and then information
immediately forgotten.
Either forgotten or just kind of floating there, waiting for the brain to sort of grab it and start putting it places.
Yeah.
So you end up on a very small scale with a scenario where the next morning you wake me up, you say, we have to go to our appointment. And I say, what appointment? And you say, the appointment that I told you about yesterday. Now, this is where something really interesting happens. My brain will go, did she tell me about the appointment? My first instinct will be no, because I didn't remember it, so she must not have told me.
Right.
And in a previous incarnation, my response would be, you never told me that we had an appointment. Now I know better for a variety of reasons.
Well, I mean, my response to that would be, would I make up the fact that I told you?
Right. But this is where we get into the concept of self-preservation and protecting your self-esteem. Because either she didn't tell me, in which case I'm right, or she did tell me and I didn't remember, in which case there's something wrong with me. And it's in the mind's instinct to try and protect itself as an unconscious, reflex. Right. So it makes much more sense that she did tell me and I simply forgot. Logically, that's likely the case. But in terms of my own ability to process information, especially if you're autistic and not fully comfortable with it, it's far better for you to acknowledge in your mind that she must not have told me, because it's not possible that I could have not absorbed that.
And this is it gets into actually a really complicated thing, which is every topic we talk about, as I keep saying, where I actually I would get angry because I'd be like, why would you even say that to me? Obviously, I told you, this is so dumb. And then it eventually led into one day me going, why is it so important to you to be right about this? And then you explaining that to me and me going, sometimes you can just make a mistake and it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. We can just own our mistakes and move on with our day.
Right. And that is a result of trust that you have to have with the person, a result of a lifetime, pretty much, of constantly not remembering things, constantly being wrong, and constantly being chastised for not acknowledging things that happen.
But what you needed was somebody to say, well, yeah, you're wrong, but it doesn't matter.
Right.
Who cares? We're still going to get to our appointment on time.
Right.
And that's ultimately where we both had to end up being.
Right. So the question then becomes, is it more important for you to be right about the fact that I didn't tell you, or is it more important for you to acknowledge that I did tell you, you didn't remember, and then we go to our appointment?
Exactly.
Would you be willing to miss this appointment based solely on the premise that you are right?
Which I am ashamed to admit we have done many times.
Yes.
Because we were fighting over the issue of, well, why would you say that to me? Because I clearly said it. Well, no, you didn't, because I'm right.
It's communication.
That legitimately took a lot of work.
It's communication, and it involves a great deal of trust and a lot of me going, obviously she's right, because this is the exact kind of thing that I would forget. And because she's right, I must be wrong. But ultimately, that doesn't matter.
Right. And that comes with trust big time, because that requires for you to trust that I'm not going to berate you or make fun of you or say something like, oh, you're such a absent-minded professor. Of course you forgot again. Mm-hmm. That rests solely in your ability to trust that I'll say, it doesn't matter. Let's just get ready and go.
It's a lifetime of constantly being chastised for not being able to process information. And it really lends itself to a much more healthy upbringing that comes from, if possible, early diagnosis and mechanisms that you put in place where you teach the child that they're often wrong and it actually doesn't matter that much.
Yep, I think so.
And it's actually really important for them to grow up with a sense of, comfort with the fact that they do have genuine disabilities that are okay, and it means that everyone loves and considers their feelings and cares about them anyway.
Right, because that's another thing that everybody that listens to the podcast really should understand, is that when we got together as a couple in this current incarnation, you were a fully grown man on your own who had been on your own for a very long time, and you had ways of dealing with things, and you were fully formed, kind of, but not, because the full formation was a mask. And we had to literally get through all of those layers of protection you built around yourself, having been a single man, a single father, on your own, having to pay everything, having to work, having to do all these things while not being able to process anything, in order for us to get down to you being able to be in a functional partnership. But it looked to me and to everyone else around you that you were just this really functional man. So why would we need to work on anything? Why wouldn't I just take your word for things? Why wouldn't I just? And a lot of times that unfortunately looks like abuse and or gaslighting to the partner.
Yeah.
Because times would be where I would just be like, what, I must be wrong. It doesn't matter. Because again, functional human male, driver's license, apartment, job, child that, he raised and didn't die, like functional male. So people from the outside and even me would say, well, why are you fighting about these basic little things? Essentially what I'm trying to tell you is the Moshe that you hear now is not the Moshe of 2 and 3 years ago.
No. And it involves a lot of tug of war, because you get into the duality of correctness versus expediency.
Mm-hmm.
I'm right because you didn't tell me about the appointment. You know that I'm wrong, but is it more important to prove to you that you're right and I'm wrong than it is to simply acknowledge that it's possible that you might be wrong, even though that you know that you're not, in order to move past this? And does it really matter? Or is it important enough that it needs to be proven to me that I'm actually mistaken in order to advance myself? And meanwhile, the appointment is no.
Right. So it was a combination, and I'll explain it to you. At first, as a logical human person, I put a lot of my own feelings aside of feeling like gaslit. And I know that I was right there, but it doesn't really matter. And then I would push them down and push them down and push them down until they had to be acknowledged. Like, hey, Moshe, I know that you're this big man or whatever, but you're wrong. So that's where you can't really do that. It's not a good long-term solution. The long-term solution to us was that we both had to come sort of halfway. You had to say like, okay, I can be wrong. And I had to say, okay, you can be wrong and it doesn't matter. And that's where we had to land. But me saying, no, you were right, was just me pushing down my feelings, and it wasn't a good long-term solution. And you thinking that you're wrong all the time just because you're you also isn't a good long-term solution.
And I mean, this is a topic that we'll definitely discuss in a future episode. And I'm going to bring it up a few times because it's something that I actually have very strong feelings about. And that is the concept of accommodation.
Right.
What is too little accommodation, but what is too much accommodation? And unfortunately, through my own research and experience and life living, I've come across a lot of mixed neurodiversity couples where the relationship is consistent about what they consider to be love, but the love itself is very much about over-accommodation,
right,
acceptance, and again, long-term studies may or may not prove it, but I believe in the end, resentment just has to eventually exist.
Yes. Again, this is a thing that may or may not earn me fans, but my personality is such that I can only accommodate like pretend stuff for so long. And that ended up being really good in our relationship, but also very painful. There were a lot of big growing pains while we had to work through that.
For a long time, so a bit of a sidetrack story. At another incarnation of my life, I became a continuing care aide, which is known in a variety of circles as PCW, personal care worker, or home support. Anyway, it's called, basically you're the kind of person either working in an institution or at home that helps people who are unable to with functionality.
Yeah.
From personal care to cooking and cleaning. And I work almost consistently in the presence of people with late stage dementia for a variety of reasons. Some of it was actually incredibly selfish because consistently most people in institutions requiring care are women. And at that stage in their life, they don't really know where they are, let alone who's looking after them. And that was really the only way that they could get me enough experience to do my job. But as a consequence of that, I ended up dealing with people at various stages of Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia, to the point that I legitimately started believing that I must have dementia because a lot of my symptoms were very much the same as theirs. And there was big plaques on the wall in one facility that I worked at that said, while you're on this ward, you live in there. And it is a way of protecting their ability to recognize that they are unfortunately slowly losing their mind. And if someone walks up to you and says, someone walked up to me once and said, do you still have the goat that I sold you? Now, this was in the early 2000s in a long-term care facility.
Right.
with no goats to be seen
Right.
anywhere. And the proper response would have been in this instance to say, you didn't sell me a goat. You were a 95-year-old woman.
Right.
And you do not live on a farm. But the response that we were supposed to give is, yes, I do have it.
It's at home.
It's at home.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And then you move on and
Right.
continue your rounds.
And I full on know that about somebody with dementia. But my husband, who by all accounts a fully functional human being and totally capable of not being that way, because I understand why you thought you were demented, but you absolutely weren't.
No.
It was just because you have autism and ADHD, it's even worse because they're oppositional to each other. Autism seeks comfort. ADHD seeks novelty. Autism doesn't want to be touched so much. ADHD, touch everything. Like it's there. So of course, how is your brain going to like process things if you are stuck in that?
It was very upsetting for me to believe for, albeit a very short period of time, that I was dying of dementia.
Honey.
Because I was also constantly forgetting things that I should remember. People were constantly telling me that I did things that I don't remember doing, or that I didn't do things that I swear that I did. I wasn't able to retain information that people just told me. I would forget people, places, and names constantly. And I believe that there was something drastically wrong with me.
Yes. And people can misdiagnose your situation as a whole bunch of things. I've had people tell me that they think you're schizophrenic. I've had people tell me that they think you're bipolar. I've had people tell me that they think all kinds of things about you because of that oppositional behavior. And the reality is he was diagnosed by an accredited professional. He's none of those things.
Right.
But I can see why you would entertain them.
But I was non-diagnosed for a long time. And I'd love to get into it in more detail at some point. But I was very defiant, as is the tendency of what we're discussing. And I would often have meltdowns when I was not able to process things. And rather than acknowledging it and attempting to, work with it, they tried to end it. So I was given antidepressants. I was given sedatives. I was given antipsychotics. I was given things that essentially made me placid, suggestible, and easy to deal with. Because when you're having an overt reaction to overstimulation, instead of working with the person, you give them pills that will essentially turn them into zombies so that they're easier to work with.
That's really sad. And that's actually a whole episode. I think I'm going to write that down today. We're going to talk about that. Because, again, one of the nicest things that I've ever heard about you is what's wrong with him? There's a whole host of other things.
There's actually, and again, I don't want to get into the political nature of it, but there's a particular, we'll call it a commercial, that was put out by a certain organization that treats autism essentially like a demon, like a devil, like a disease. It's a well-known advertisement, and I don't need to mention the organization.
They speak too much. We'll put it that way.
They do.
They overly speak.
And they treat autism and other neurodivergency from the perspective of it being an inconvenience and a scourge that must be destroyed.
No.
And they make no qualms about stating that their goal is to cure autism as much as possible.
The only cure for autism is, not having any more autistics. It's not a good thought.
And I mean, we can discuss the logistics of whether or not it's reasonable to have children with a high instance of having autism, but I mean, that's neither here nor there. So let's talk more about peaceful resolution.
Right. So emotions. How do emotions affect a healthy disagreement? So when we're talking about healthy disagreement, I want to say not one of the, you're wrong, I was wrong, you're right, blah, 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 but a healthy disagreement. So let's say I think that one, the children should go to one school, and I feel strongly about that. And you think one of the children should go to a different school, and you feel strongly about that, and we're having a discourse about that. How would emotional response affect something like that?
So, autistic people are by their very nature, in most cases, and if this is not the case for you, then, it's not the case, and good on you for it. But it has a lot to do with overstimulation and oversensitization to various things. And emotion is a very stimulating experience. When you're happy, when you're sad, when you're scared, when you're nervous, when you're upset. And just like an autistic will experience sounds and sights and smells and touches and whatever in a much more exaggerated way a lot of the time. Not all the time, because again, one autistic is different than another. Emotions affect them in a lot of ways like that. For example, if it's a particular thing that you feel very strongly about, you will pursue that subject or that perspective with consistent emotion and consistent rationality. Whereas an autistic person often experiences emotions in very exaggerated ways. Like, I feel very strongly about this particular school where I want one of the kids to go. And my response might be to say that it's, I don't know, I'll try and clean it up a little bit, but it's absolutely unacceptable in this circumstance, and you clearly don't understand, and you don't care about how I feel about this, and it's very upsetting that you wouldn't even consider this, and you know that this is not where I stand.
Right.
It's a very disproportionate response, especially considering that at its very core, I'm dealing with someone who is my partner, who I love, who loves me, who is very reasonable, and who genuinely cares about me.
To a point, I'm not perfect either. Listen, so when you have an overt response like that, my response is to feel unheard.
Right.
And when I don't feel heard, I have a tendency to talk to you louder.
Yes.
Which comes across as yelling.
Yes.
And that is a way to escalate a situation always. I've been told by not few people that I'm a little bit too assertive. The last time was today, actually. My boss called me and said, maybe you can put some emojis when you write emails because you're a little assertive.
You can be very direct in what you're saying.
Yeah. So I'm not perfect either, but one of my triggers is to feel unheard. And when I feel unheard for whatever reason, my instinct is to speak louder.
Right. So the consistent conclusion of this, whether we're talking about us or whether we're talking about in general, is when you allow emotions to insert themselves into discussions, you have to, number one, make them consistent with the topic that you're discussing.
Yeah.
And number two, you have to remember who you're discussing it with.
Right. Are you my enemy? We use that a lot.
Yeah.
Are you my enemy? I'm not your enemy.
And this is something that they actually talk about a lot in couples therapy, where you have these constant arguments and the therapist will say, well, do you feel that this person is your enemy? Do you feel that this person is actively trying to harm you? Do you feel that this person is regularly trying to undermine you or do things that will negatively impact you? If not, then disproportionate emotional reaction to a very reasonable discussion looks like you treating them like your opponent rather than your partner.
Yeah.
You're not trying to pull them into the mud. You're not trying to shoot them in the face. You're trying to express what could be a very valid opinion, but you're doing it in a way like you're talking to your worst enemy instead of the person that you love.
What I find is helpful to me, and this is very personal, I apologize if it makes anybody blush, but when we're in a situation like that, so now we're discussing escalation and de-escalation. So the fastest way for us to escalate is for him to make me feel unheard and then for me to start yelling. It's not really yelling, but it's yelling enough.
It's talking loud.
Yeah. A de-escalation technique that I use in that scenario is actually I picture myself laying in your arms when we're having pillow talk, going, would I talk to him this way then? He's not a different person. And that helps.
Yes. And a lot of the things that work for me are very similar and really just come back to a discussion that, we had where you said, do you honestly feel that I would do something to hurt you?
Mm-hmm.
And so while something might make me feel, we'll say, very passionate, ultimately it comes back to, do I feel that her position is meant to harm me? If not, then, and it's always not, by the way, then is it reasonable for me to get this upset over something that she's talking about that she believes?
I mean, while fully acknowledging that when you have this much proximity and closeness to another person, you can accidentally hurt them. And that should always be able to be open and be a discussion.
Right.
Your overarching thing should definitely not be to hurt your partner.
No. What is that thing that your bubby told you?
That my Zeta didn't come out of the box that way?
That, but also you were the master of your own words.
She said you're the master of the words until they're out of your mouth.
Exactly.
She also used to say your tongue is going to hang you, but
Same difference. So essentially, when you have the ability to process your thoughts and you give it like the extra second or two to ask yourself, is this really the way that I want to present this to this person who loves me and cares about me? Then it might be able to sort of withhold these words. And this isn't like an Orwellian world where we're prosecuted for the thoughts that we have.
Mm-hmm.
So you can think as dark as you want. I mean, you shouldn't, but you can go over all these negative things in your head as much as you want. But when you're ready for them to explode out of your mouth, maybe take a second to go, maybe don't say that.
Again, a lot of the things my bubby, and for those who don't know what a bubby is, that's my grandmother. That's my maternal grandmother.
Right.
Who basically raised me because my mom had to work.
Right.
From a very young age would drill things into my head. And that was one of them. You are the master of your words until they come out of your mouth. It was that. And hate is a very strong word. Don't use hate lightly. There were a lot of things, but it was basically designed to make me a better person.
She was a wonderful woman. I really loved her.
Yeah, she was. She liked you a lot.
Yes.
Yeah. So those are some good techniques to sort of de-escalate. Once you've de-escalated to the point where you can have a logical conversation, being literal and assertive are usually the ways to go, especially when you have a Moshe and a Leah. Because Moshe and Leah both have certain characteristics that, again, don't come across nice to everybody. We're both very assertive. We're both very strong personalities. We're both very intelligent. We both have very good ideas and very strong bases for them. I don't know. You can continue to read into that as much as possible.
Yes.
So you need to be literal and assertive when you're speaking to one of us, because we're just going to be like, just tell me what you want.
Right. And unfortunately, we came from a place in the world where there was definitely an overemphasis on, tailoring your words to be less aggressive or
Niciness.
The concept of not saying certain things because you don't want to hurt their feelings, and being respectful of everyone's feelings, and you don't want to be upsetting to their feelings. So you shouldn't say the things that you feel. You should say the things that are
around what you feel.
Like you should be more indirect, and hopefully they'll pick it up, because the worst thing in the world is if you upset someone.
Right.
And the reality of the situation is if you're going to be indirect with someone, then you can't expect the result to be what you're looking for a lot of the time.
Absolutely.
So it's like it's like the joke. I'm going to get nerdy for a second. It's like the joke that, okay, let's talk about Dungeons and Dragons for a second. I'm sorry. I'll be very quick. It is the wont of when you're playing a game of Dungeons and Dragons and you encounter a djinn or a genie,
mm-hmm.
or anything that grants wishes, the dungeon master will often feel it to adopt the personality of the person, to try and take what the players are asking for and make it as negative as possible, given the verbiage.
Right.
So they always say that you have to be very careful what you wish for, because you're going to get it exactly the way you ask for it. For example, someone would ask for $1 million and they would say, okay.
And you'd get it all in pennies.
You get it all in pennies, or worse. I want to be a millionaire. Fantastic. You just robbed the bank.
Yeah.
Here's all the money.
Right.
The police are on their way. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
And that is essentially what you're asking for. If you are asking for a particular thing, ask for the thing that you want in exactly the form that you want to receive it. If you want, and we talked about the different communication styles, passive, aggressive, and assertive. If you want attention from your partner, and say, would you be able to sit with me and talk for a second? Don't be, you know what, I'm so lonely. I wish someone would just sit with me and spend some time with me.
Uh-huh.
Or it would be really nice if we could go to like a nice restaurant tonight.
No one's kissed me in a while. I wonder if there's anybody around who could give me a kiss.
It's okay if you don't want to spend time with me, I guess. I'll be fine. The stereotype of the Jewish mother is like, that's okay, I'll sit in the dark.
Now stay home and sit in the dark and you can come get me when you're done.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, the joke is, how many Jewish mothers does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is, it doesn't really matter.
I'll just sit in the
I'll
dark.
just sit in the dark.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about me. That describes my mother. It's not meant to be offensive, but that's essentially where the concept comes from. And if you've met my mother, that's exactly where she'd be. It's like, don't worry, I'll just sit in the dark. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
Clearly, you don't care about me sitting in the light, so I'll just sit in the dark. It's fine.
Passive aggressive to the extreme.
So yeah, that's so when you want something, when I want something from Leah, I'll ask for it. Would you be able to hug me? Could we have a conversation? And you'll do the same. You'll tell me what you want, and we'll discussing what we'll discussing.
We're discussing it.
We're discussing it. That's one for the blooper reel. We'll discuss it in a future episode. The whole concept of you should have known, or you should know this.
That's the worst.
You should know. Sometimes makes sense. Sometimes not so much.
You should know I love you. And my response is, I do know you love me. Now I want you to show me. I want hugs and kisses and romance.
Right. Any final thoughts?
No, I think I would like to leave it with being literal and assertive because that's my strong suit, I gotta say.
Take it away, Leah.
All right. Thank you very much for listening. Please listen, download, share, send us your feedback, positive or negative, as long as it comes from a constructive place.
Yes. Our email is contact@nowyouknow1autistic.com, I believe. You can like and comment.
We're on TikTok. We're active on TikTok.
We're active on TikTok, mostly just fun stuff. We have YouTube. It's all audio, no video for now. And you can go to our Podbean website and look there. And we'll talk to you next time.
We'll see you next time.
Well, that's our show for today. Now you know one autistic just a little bit better. So something you may not know about some autistics is that we often struggle with ending social interactions. So, Leah?
All right, Moshe, I'll take care of it. Thank you for listening to Now You Know One Autistic. See you next week.